these people!
Hey, welcome back to Screen Crush. I'm Ryan Airy, and this is all of the Easter eggs, references, and little things that you might have missed in The Last of Us Episode 8, When We Are in Need. So this episode had a lot of Easter eggs to the game, but I'm actually more impressed by what they added to the story. There's also a lot of allegory and biblical symbolism that I'm going to break down for you, and the episode actually has a flaw, or at least a story point that I fundamentally disagree with that I'm going to talk about a little bit later on. And there were also lots of hints that led up to that big twist, but first let's get to those Easter eggs. The title of the episode, When We Are in Need, could be paraphrased from Hebrews 4:16. Let us then approach the throne of grace with confidence so that we may receive mercy and find grace when we are in need of help. Now, the Bible actually has many passages about approaching God in times of both physical and spiritual need. In this show, there's a lot of needy people who need guidance and a strong protector, and Pastor Dave is here to take advantage of them to bolster his own ego and twisted worldview. So we start in Silver Lake, Colorado, which later on we're told is a resort.
It's not a real town name. It's a resort.
A resort?
And that is a really interesting turn of phrase because it allows us to make an immediate comparison to the other communities that we've seen. Fedra ruled Boston with an iron fist. Kansas City was essentially run by angry anarchists, while Jackson is an actual, real community where people work together. But Silver Lake is called a fake town, both because it's a resort, but it's also a community that is built on lies. This is not a real community of people who have banded together for a common goal. They follow Pastor Dave because they are afraid and want to be protected. And literally and metaphorically, they swallow the truth about what they actually are.
Wait, so what are they all so afraid of?
Well, zombies. But I also think that they're afraid of the truth. Despite what Pastor Dave says, I think that everyone knows that they are eating human flesh. And Pastor Dave allowed them to live this lie that they were eating deer meat.
What is it?
Venison.
Now, the title of the episode is also reflected in the banner that hangs in the dining room, and that also hangs in the game. Now, we're made to think that this banner is talking about God, but consider that it's hanging up in the dining hall. And then we start to understand that it's actually referring to Pastor Dave and how he will provide human meat for everyone to eat.
Tasty.
What'd you say?
What? I don't know. What did I say?
That human meat is tasty.
Yeah, man. Human meat. Like the meat humans give me. Tasty.
Ah, okay. What'd you say?
Nothing. Estoy hambriento.
What's that?
Oh, I'm just learning Spanish, but it's taking forever because I'm just a little dog. I'll probably just quit like I always do.
Don't quit, Doug. I mean, learning a new language is really hard if you're trying all on your own. And by the way, if learning a new language is something you've always wanted to do, I recommend Babbel. They're the sponsor of this video. In fact, if you use our link in the description or scan our QR code to sign up, you get 60% off a Babbel subscription.
Yeah, I mean, like learning a new language is a lifetime goal of mine, but that goal seems so insurmountable.
Yeah, I know. Believe me, I was always way too intimidated to start a new language until I found Babbel. Like last year, I took a trip to Italy, and using Babbel was crucial for me navigating my way through the country. And Babbel is very easy to use. For example, Tu sei di Roma, which means you are from Rome. Haha.
Tu sei di Roma.
Te su di Roma.
Oh, Italian. Nice. Wow.
Babbel helps you start speaking a new language in just 3 weeks, and you use these short 10-minute lessons that are made by actual language teachers, not some AI or an algorithm.
AI is banned and that's good. This is mimicry of human behavior.
The lessons use situations and dialogue that you would actually use in the real world, like you're meeting new people on a train and you're asking them where they're from. And I'm telling you, Babbel really works. University studies have shown that 15 hours of Babbel equals a semester of college Spanish, and they offer lessons in 14 different languages. Babbel has a few different subscriptions to choose from, so if you are interested in learning a new language, this is a great opportunity to try it out. Click our link in the description or scan this QR code to get started today. Now back to what I was saying. The passage Dave is reading from is from the book of Revelations. So if you're unfamiliar with the book of Revelation, it's the final book of the Christian Bible, and it details a prophecy about how the world will end and be reborn. And it is weird. Like, the Bible is going along for a long time, telling a story about prophets and messiahs, disciples, like parables, and then all of a sudden at the end it turns into Twin Peaks directed by Michael Bay. Revelations is filled with imagery and symbolism and references that are best understood to a culture that existed 2,000 years ago. So its literal meaning has been debated by theologians, but one thing we all agree on is that it depicts the end of the world with some very bad things happening, lots of bloodshed, stuff like that, and then the world is reborn as a paradise. I'm actually surprised that more post-apocalyptic stories don't lean into this more. Like, post-apocalypse times would be a perfect time for a cult leader like Pastor Dave to take power by pointing to Revelations and saying, "See, I told you so." Now, this particular passage from Revelation tribulation is after the world has been destroyed and after the beast has been cast back down into the pit, and when God and Jesus have returned to the earth. So in the context of the show, Dave is trying to say that now his flock lives in this time of paradise. The world has been destroyed, emptied out, so God could fill it with love again. Now later on, Pastor Dave shares his true perversion of this idea.
The cordyceps, it loves.
But more on that in a bit. Dave is trying to use this passage to control the grief of his people, telling them,
And God will wipe away all tears from their eyes.
Which, on first viewing, seems like a nice man trying to comfort a young girl. But in hindsight, he's telling her, shut up, don't cry, I'm your daddy now. The girl asks,
When can you bury him?
and I think that she's asking because she knows, like everyone else knows, that they're eating human meat. She wants her dad buried and not eaten. But Dave lies.
The ground is too cold to dig. We'll bury your father in the spring.
Now Dave's second in command, James, is played by Troy Baker, and Baker played Joel in the Last of Us video game. Now here, I do think that they talk in code to disguise their cannibalism.
Josiah and Martin think they spotted some deer the other night.
Now, I'm not sure whether they do this to protect the secret from the others or just to lie to themselves, but this coded language persists throughout the entire episode, like when he tells Ellie,
So I sent 4 of our people to a nearby town to scavenge what they could.
they sent people out to look for humans to eat. Hunger is also a driving motivation for Ellie. She's trying to help Joel get back on his feet, but they're down to what might be jerky? Like, I'm not really sure. So this drives her to grab his rifle and start hunting. The white rabbit she takes a shot at is straight from the game where she actually takes it. In fact, it's the opening shot of the winter stage of the game. But in the game, Ellie has to specifically say,
This won't last very long.
to motivate her to chase after the deer. But in the show, she doesn't have the rabbit to fall back on, so her need for the deer meat is even more desperate. It's a really good change. Just like in the game, she doesn't get the kill shot on her first try, so she chases after the deer. Although in the game, it takes much longer. Now there's another key change from the game. In the game, Ellie finds the deer first, but here it's James and Pastor Dave. This is a great change because it lets us see these two men talk privately for a while, and it makes them seem more trustworthy.
I don't see anybody. You think we can just take it?
I mean, they're acting like they just found money on the street, but they're hoping someone comes back to claim it. One of the major themes in this episode is trust. Pastor Dave wants the trust of his flock, which is why he presses James for his support.
I sensed doubt in there.
They haven't lost faith in you, David. They're just scared.
Joel and Ellie trust one another with their lives. Ellie is tricked into trusting Pastor Dave. In fact, later in the episode, this theme of trust occurs when Joel is torturing people.
It's okay.
No.
I believe him.
No.
That shot also taken straight from the game. But the most important trusting relationship in this episode is for the audience to feel like that we can trust Pastor Dave. So these sequences where he's with Ellie are crucial. They make us feel like we know the man, even though we don't see the whole picture. So the whole sequence where she meets these guys is lifted straight from the game. Everything from how they describe their people,
From a larger group. Women, children. They're all very, very hungry.
I'm from a large group too. Also hungry.
to Ellie's threats,
Any sudden moves and I put one right between your eyes. Ditto for Buddy Boy.
and Ellie wanting penicillin.
Weapons, ammo, clothes.
Medicine? Like for infections.
And then Dave wanting to take shelter.
You, mind if we take some shelter from the cold?
Bring him with us.
At first, Ellie rightly distrusts these strangers. She doesn't give them a friendly greeting, she starts the conversation with a gun to their heads. And from her demeanor, Dave can tell that she has killed and will kill again. He sees her as a kindred spirit. Now, Ellie initially does not trust them, refusing to follow them back to the village and not even offering her name, even after Dave and James do.
My name is David. This is my friend James.
Offering your name is a way to humanize yourself to someone else. We saw this in episode 4 when a guy gives his name to Ellie to try to earn her mercy.
I'm Brian.
Dave gives his name as a way to earn trust and also to reveal who he is to Ellie. But Ellie withholding her name is a sign of distrust, which makes it even sweeter when she finally reveals her name and shows him who she really is.
Tell them that Ellie is a little girl who broke her finger!
Now, another major deviation from the game is the way that Dave earns her trust. In the game, it's told through combat as the two of them fight off like hordes of zombies, including a bloater. Now, during this sequence, they save one another's lives several times, and by the end of it, Ellie no longer bothers pointing a gun at his head. Now, the show, look, probably could use a few more zombies here and there, just saying, but they were wise to reinvent this as a dialogue scene, where Ellie gradually drops her guard. And so do we. He starts by telling us his story.
But when the Pittsburgh QZ fell in 17, Fireflies and Fedra, I left with a few others, and that's how I ended up with our flock.
And in the game, we do see that the Pittsburgh QZ has fallen, but that storyline was replaced with the Kansas City story in the show. Dave is presenting himself as a decent, humble man.
You're the leader?
Wasn't my choice. It was theirs, but yes.
But if you remember, just like 2 scenes ago, we saw him leaning on James for his continued support.
But I need to know you're with me.
He tells Ellie about his civilian life.
Before that, I was a teacher. Math. Taught kids about your age.
And this is when Ellie starts to let down her guard. We saw in episode 7 that Ellie had a begrudging respect for her school's leader, Captain Kwong. He tells Ellie that she can have a future, and afterwards, she parrots his words to Riley.
We're the only thing holding this all together.
In a way, Fedra kind of holds everything together.
Pastor Dave also goes on to make his people sound like victims.
We'd settle somewhere and then raiders would come, so we'd move again.
Which makes them seem helpless, earning Ellie's pity, when maybe they were actually the raiders, killing and eating people before they moved on. And we see Ellie's growing trust written on Bella Ramsey's face. Small smiles, a little glint in her eye. Dave says,
I believe everything happens for a reason.
And this is a little magical. I mean, Ellie and all of us are starting to think that maybe this guy does have all the answers, that there is some mystical reason for this apocalypse. After all, Ellie is already placing blind faith in her quest. She's going to Utah because she believes that her blood will create a vaccine, and she even tried it on young Sam. And Dave has found her weak point and exploited it, just like he's exploited his followers' need for God. And this is where we get the turn, which is awesome.
That crazy man was traveling with a little girl.
Which, by the way, is also in the game.
He's a crazy man traveling with a little girl.
And this seems like a good place to mention that in this episode, Pastor Dave is a metaphor for the devil. It's not subtle.
Not the beast!
And by the way, everybody, if you like our Not the Bees gag and you want to help support our channel, we have a merch store where you can get your very own Not the Bees t-shirt. The merch store greatly helps out our channel. We'd appreciate it if you stopped by and took a look at any of our high-quality t-shirts at shopzeroedition.com. We also have a Doug Father t-shirt, an original Truly t-shirt, this top 5 one where you get to write in your top 5 movies or shows, and lots of other high-quality products for you to look at at shopzeroedition.com with the link in the description. Now back to the video. So again, I'm going to generalize several stories from the Bible and the Torah about the more popular interpretation of Satan. There are several figures in these religious texts like the snake in the Garden of Eden, Lucifer, Hasatan the opposer, the beast in Revelations, but popular belief has kind of melded these figures into one, with theologians debating about whether or not that's actually correct.
Well, of course, there are all manner of lesser imps and demons, Pete, but the great Satan himself is red and scaly with a bifurcated tail. He carries a hay fork.
So, disclaimer over, here is the story of the devil that is analogous to Pastor Dave. The devil was once an angel named Lucifer Morningstar, who was the greatest of all God's creations. Lucifer led a rebellion against God along with 1/3 of the angelic host, and they were defeated and cast down to hell. Lucifer ruled in hell by turning people away from God so they would be his to torment in hell for all eternity. And the book of Revelations talks about casting this beast back into the fire and everything working out just fine.
So what's all this got to do with Pastor Dave?
Well, I'm glad you asked. Pastor Dave, like Lucifer, was not always evil. He served his students and was a regular guy. But the outbreak forced him to split from society, as Lucifer split from heaven. And Dave, by forming this radical evil way of life, took other people with him. He lies and tempts people the way Satan takes many forms to steal people's souls. Except, instead of stealing souls, Dave goes all Hannibal on you. David and James are also biblical names. James was one of Jesus' 12 disciples, and along with Peter and John, James is one of his favorites. Just like how we see James in this show has favored status with David. And David famously was the great king of the Israelites. He slew Goliath, freed his people from Philistine rule, was a great king, and one hell of a writer.
I will fear no evil, for thou art with me.
In the same way, this David is the leader of his people. He brought them through great hardship, and he has a way with words.
No, I believe everything happens for a reason.
But King David was also a ruler with flaws. He once sent a man into battle just so he could marry his widow after David had already impregnated her. But King David repented of his sins, while Pastor David, like Lucifer, has not. In fact, later in the episode, David admits that something inside of him has always been evil, and that the fungus just allowed him to release his true nature.
I've always had a violent heart, but then the world ended and I was shown the truth.
And this is what the book of Revelations essentially does for the world. It reveals the truth. Disaster after disaster befalls Earth. Plagues, stars being wiped out of the sky, horses with the heads of snakes. I might have made that one up, but I'm pretty sure that's in there. The point is, the world is wiped clean and nothing of the old world remains. And that is what's happening in The Last of Us. People can no longer hide behind civilization, and they have to reveal who they really are. Joel starts off with a gruff exterior and emotional barriers, but eventually he breaks down and accepts Ellie into his heart and becomes her new father figure.
Joel will be your father figure. He'll cut off a guy's kneecap.
Very good, high five. So David is the inverse of Joel. He is someone who puts up a nice facade to mask his cruelty. He says,
Well, I found God after the apocalypse, which is either the best time or the worst time to find him. Hard to say.
But what he actually means here is he found the power of God after the apocalypse, and we see him exploit that power for his own pleasure.
The fighting is the part I like the most.
But what's most satanic about David is that, unlike Kathleen or Phaedra, he gains power through lies and deceit. This goes back to our themes of trust and faith. David gets Ellie to trust him. Even when he releases her,
So you're just gonna let her get away?
it's actually a trap.
When the sun rises, I'll lead a group out to pick up her trail.
He knows they can track her back to the house, and he figures that she can't move a sick man. And all of this was foreshadowed by Maria's parting words to Ellie.
Be careful who you put your faith in. The only people who can betray us are the ones we trust.
When David returns to the resort, there's another big cannibal clue when they serve dinner.
What is it?
Venison.
But we know that it's not venison because they literally just took the deer. It hasn't even been dressed yet. Even the fact that she has to ask what it is, that's a big clue.
Silent breed is people!
And next, there's an interesting scene in the dining hall.
You should kill him. You should kill both of them.
Yeah, why does he hit her in the face like that?
Now, he hits her for a couple reasons. One, he's already decided that he wants Ellie for himself. But two, he's the only one who gets to decide who lives and who dies. Later, David says,
I'm a shepherd surrounded by sheep.
but he's actually a wolf among his sheep, and he wants to make sure that it stays that way. It's also appropriate that the daughter's name is Hannah because Hannah means grace. And then he slaps her in the face. So grace is what God offers to the human race in place of punishment. And if Pastor Dave is the devil, his way is the antithesis of grace. Just as he wants to be a father figure to Ellie that will be the antithesis of Joel. He tells her,
But the truth is, Hannah, you will always have a father.
and he's not talking about God here, he's talking about himself. This scene is great on a rewatch because it shows you what was under the surface in that opening scene. No one here is happy because they all have to eat people. Okay, Ellie injects the world's greatest penicillin into Joel's wound.
Where do we get penicillin from?
Fungus.
And outside, she knows that the bad guys are coming because she sees the birds flying away. Now, when it's obvious that Joel is not going to wake up, Ellie has to become the protector. Now, we've talked about this all season, how a major theme of the show is how people show love. Specifically, how some people, like Joel or Bill, show love through protection. And now that role has been inverted, with Ellie protecting Joel from these horse murdering a-holes.
Enough to kill a horse.
What's wrong killing horses?
The scene unfolds pretty much like it does in the game, with Ellie leaving Joel in the basement, getting the horse shot out from under her, and then being taken prisoner. Now, once she's prisoner, the men want to kill her, and David drops another bit of foreshadowing.
You so hungry for vengeance? Deliver it.
Oh, because they were gonna eat Ellie.
That's right. So Joel comes to just in time to ambush the wrong guy in the wrong basement. The guy passes out with blood in his teeth, another way to foreshadow the cannibalism revealed. And I just want to say that as soon as this guy entered the basement, I thought of a cannibalism storyline from The Walking Dead, when the heroes were kidnapped by cannibals and all seems lost, and Rick just says,
Fucking with the wrong people.
that is one of the best moments in that show. We go straight from Joel lying on the floor to Ellie on the floor, and David says,
I started worrying you wouldn't wake up.
this is again showing us inverted roles. The episode begins with Ellie worried that Joel won't wake up because she was his protector. But now David is trying to take over that protector role from Ellie. And this in particular is a scene that takes on a whole new meaning when you realize that David is a secret Satan. When Ellie wakes up, David does not want to punish her. He wants her to worship him. First, he tries to force her gratitude.
Did you hear me say the others want to kill you?
But Ellie resists.
But I stopped them.
Now, because Ellie does not cave in right away, it shows that she is powerful, and that makes David want her even more.
And all I want is an equal.
He tells her that what he wants is her trust, and her trust is just another word for faith. He even implies that if she doesn't give him her faith, then she will live a life of torment.
But if you can't find a way to trust me, then yes, you are alone.
This whole scene has its roots in the book of Mazzio, when Jesus fasted in the desert and was tempted by Satan. And this was dramatized perfectly by Martin Scorsese in The Last Temptation of Christ. So when you even see these scenes side by side, you see they're very similar. Ellie is trapped in a cell while Willem Dafoe's Jesus is inside a protective circle. In this scene, Satan tempts Jesus 3 times, offering him companionship, power, and the kingdom of heaven. And David, very similarly, makes 3 offers to Ellie. He offers to save Joel if she joins him.
I can tell the others to stop looking for him.
Then he offers her the chance to run the town with him.
Think of what we could do together. We'd grow, spread out.
Which is pretty specifically paraphrased from the Bible when Satan offers Jesus kingdoms on earth to rule.
Your heart is so greedy. You said it was God, but you really wanted power.
While David is essentially offering Ellie a chance to rule his kingdom at his side.
They follow me. And they would follow us.
He even gives her the old, "we're not so different, you and I" speech.
And you know what I see when I look at you? You remind me of me.
You and I are not so different.
We're not so different, you and I.
Are we so different, you and I?
Our methods have not differed as much as you pretend.
We're not so different, you and I, Lieutenant.
The scene also has a monologue that really summarizes the theme of the game and the show when he describes cordyceps. He kind of reveres the fungus, saying that it caused his religious conversion.
But then the world ended and I was shown the truth.
Right. By God.
No. But cordyceps.
He goes on to say,
it's fruitful, it multiplies.
And this is paraphrased from the book of Genesis, when God commanded his creations to go forth and multiply. And finally, he says,
it loves.
And the show's co-creator Craig Mazin has said as much in the Last of Us podcast when he was discussing Tessa's romantic kiss with the zombie.
The fungus loves too.
So Mazin's point was that the fungus, like all life, is trying to propagate as an act of love. And a recurring theme in the show is that people show love in different ways. Like I said, for Bill and Joel, it's protection, but for Frank, it's different.
Paying attention to things. It's how we show love.
And this is where I disagree a bit with the showrunner's take. The fungus does not love, it reacts. It is a stimulus and a response. If you want to anthropomorphize a plant, then you can say that a tree loves the sun, sure. But a tree can't feel actual love. It is just committing an act of photosynthesis.
Sure, but could you argue that the entire natural world is just one single act of love?
But see, Doug, the fungus is not love, it's assault. This fungus spreads with no regard for any other life. And this is alluded to when Ellie calls him an animal and he says,
well, yes, we all are. That's sort of the point.
And this is the real theme of The Last of Us game and show. It's about how the human race has been wiped out by a fungus, which in turn has caused us to lose our humanity. On a micro level, we see this with Joel. Following the death of Sarah, he did terrible things to survive. And on a macro level, we see that places like Kansas City are consumed with hatred until they are literally consumed by cordyceps. And this is like how Dave's flock is consumed by fear, so they in turn consume people. Just like the cordyceps, they now consume human flesh, displaying how they have lost their humanity. Like most animals in nature, the cordyceps simply respond to stimuli.
Hey.
Not you, buddy, you're great. And we see this in Pastor David's animal-like behavior.
And it secures its future with violence if it must.
But the difference between the fungus and humanity is that the cordyceps has to kill and humans choose to kill. But the most important thing about Satan in stories is that he's always used to show the inverse of God. For example, instead of showing people grace, he punishes, which is indicative when he literally slaps a girl whose name means grace. And in this show, Pastor Dave is shown to be the inverse of Joel. At first, he tells Ellie that he wants to be a father to her.
I've decided you do need a father.
But through the bars of the prison, we see that what he actually wants is to sexually assault her.
The fighting is the part I like the most.
Then we shift right to the scene where Joel tortures these guys. It's also straight out of the game.
But you're gonna mark it on the map. And it better be the exact same spot your buddy points to.
And this is where Joel shows that he is the opposite of the fungus. The fungus kills because it has to. Joel is killing to protect Ellie, but really I think he's kind of enjoying it too. Just like in the game, Joel finds Ellie's backpack and then the boathouse filled with dead bodies that we won't show on here so we don't get demonetized. So then they're about to chop up Ellie. And by the way, it's pretty appropriate that she's fighting cannibals in a kitchen and dining hall, right? So the dialogue and shot selection are all taken straight from the game.
I'm infected! I'm infected!
In the dining hall, she starts a fire, just like in the game, and just like in the Kansas City finale, fire is a metaphor for rage. Rage is like the fungus. It eats, it consumes, it destroys, just like fire. David is also completely unbothered by the fire and doesn't care if the whole lodge burns down. Again, we're hitting the Satanism symbolism pretty hard here.
Yeah, I mean, what is this guy, a Dark Funeral album? Right, man, it's a metal band. Get hip.
So the whole sequence of Ellie versus David is also taken straight from the game. It's a stealth mission where you have to slowly injure him. Although the big difference between Ellie and Joel is that Joel doesn't scream right before he stabs someone. Then he tries to assault her, and we see how much he's actually adopted the cordyceps warped version of love. He takes pleasure in harming others. It makes him feel powerful and complete. Ellie fights him off in a brutal scene that goes on for an uncomfortably long time, a lot like in the game. I also thought that there was a parallel here with another scene with a cannibal in Silence of the Lambs.
If you like pina coladas.
Ellie then frees herself from hell and enters the world outside. Joel, for some reason, sneaks up on her and freaks her out.
No! Get off of me!
Whereas in the game, he pulls her off of David, but that's a minor nitpicking point. As he leaves her, he says,
It's okay, baby girl.
Now this kind of fatherly intonation is so sweet because it shows how much he has finally accepted her and is coping with Sarah's death. But also, just to really nail down the biblical symbolism, it's showing how Ellie has been saved from Satan by a father figure.
Joe will be your father figure. He's a kind of Jesse Custer.
Jesse Custer.
Yeah, man, it's like a hidden reference in the video for people to go look up. Jesse Custer.
Well guys, that's all the Easter eggs we found, but if you found any, let us know in the comments below or at me on Twitter. And if it's your first time here, please subscribe and smash that bell for alerts. For Screen Crush, I'm Ryan Airy.